Hello and welcome to the two-man power trip of wrestling. Your host, JP John Paz. With me today, very special guest, former WCW Tag Team Champion, former WCW Hardcore Champion. He is, of course, the Don, Big Vito. Big Vito, welcome in. How you doing?
I'm doing fine, Johnny Paz. I'm telling you, everything is good on a two-man power trip. Can't believe I'm back on the show, but you paid a high dollar because I'm in demand.
What is going on in your world? Because it seems like you've been getting all over the news, so to speak, with some NXT talent.
Well, I tell you, the NXT talents, how can I say this politely? You're trying to mix experience and youth. And everything I'm doing is to try to help them. We're going through a third party for communication instead of communication being direct. So, things I post online, some people are taking it as derogatory, but it's not derogatory. It's meant to help the cause. When people don't know how to do a gimmick and they say, okay, I'm going to do this guy, but this guy is for real and he lives this lifestyle and he does this for a living. Wouldn't you want to talk to him to get some insight?
Yeah.
I will tell you one thing. Since you brought this up, like right up the show, Tony D'Angelo, right? I see world of talent. He works hard. That's what caught my eye from day one. He works hard. He had Vito gave 150% plus. He works hard, right? But I had the benefit of having the greats before me teach me. I'm not saying that he's not getting taught in NXT, but once you don't go through the territories, you don't learn from different people because that's not the concept of wrestling today. And how could you teach somebody how to do a character when you never did it yourself and you're going on watching old tapes? When a phone number, an invitation to my home, um, hey, let's meet for lunch, hey, let's do this, has been allocated and sent out, along with emails to Matt Bloom and tweets on social media. This isn't like me knocking anybody. This is helping the cause. Right now, they're involved in a Rocky theme, word for word. John, you watch the product.
Yep.
You see the comments of everybody. What are your thoughts on this?
Feel like you got, especially if NXT can bring in veterans. Like, remember they brought in Ted DiBiase at one point. He was doing some stuff with them. Like, they're always bringing in veteran guys, even if it's their own guy, Baron Corbin, whoever. But sometimes it's outside the company. So I feel like, obviously, you kind of meshed with Tony D'Angelo, even Stacks, pretty well, and the gimmick very, very well. So why not either bring you in behind the scenes or bring you in on television and do something, do an angle or just help those guys out because obviously they're on the come up and they're learning, but like you're saying, they're not executing maybe 100% of the gimmick as they could.
Now, when you talk about it, what is the gimmick? The gimmick is not a character, a fictional character. It's not something that you just pick up and you say, "Oh yeah, I'm going to be a don. I'm going to be in the mafia." You know, Chuck Zito. I use him because you saw my posts and my tweets with him, and I talk. I'm friends with him.
Yep.
So when you talk about his legacy and where he's been and what he's done and where he's gone, right? When he came into WCW, reason he left WCW because he was too legit, right?
Mm.
So you keep in contact with him. He's done some great stuff. He's got his own life. He's outside of wrestling. But when you talk about what the persona is of a Don and what a Godfather is, like John Gotti, my uncle Lucky Luciano, my cousin Paul Castellano, and all these different people, You say, hey, here's a guy with a legacy who's lived this lifestyle. It wasn't, I was telling my wife, I said, yeah, those clothes I used to wear on WCW, those were my regular clothes I wore every day in Staten Island. It wasn't like something I made up. And you can't act a certain way and you can't do a certain thing because it's in you. You're being natural. Just like now, me talking to you, and I'm here and I'm wearing my Versace, my hat. I got my Versace watch on. I got my Rolex on. Yeah, I look like $1,000,000. Everything is good. You look at my face on camera and you say, he's TV ready. So what is the problem? You know what I mean? Let's get together and make money. Let's get together and do something positive. Like I said, I see the potential to do great things because he's a workhorse. And things I see because I watch him work, I say, okay, he's missing this and this and this. But nobody's taking the time to really pinpoint because NXT, WWE, they have a whole bunch of people they have to take care of, right? So it's hard to designate one agent to say, hey, this is how you do it. But if you don't have an agent or you don't have anybody who knows how to do it correctly, how are you teaching him? Right?
Right.
So, and this goes for the other three um, partners in the crew. And there's no disrespect. And there was never no disrespect in my tweets. There was no disrespect in anything. It's for them to get the idea as, hey, he's trying to tell us something, but they're so young in the business, they didn't catch that and they got upset about it. So here it is. I'm on two-man power trip, the biggest podcast going. Hey guys, I'm willing to work. I want to work as a team. And your advocate who's been talking to me knows this. So why don't we get together and let's do some serious good TV? As you know, John, I'm going down to Tulsa. I'm the new Tulsa King. I'm going down to Vince Russo down there in Colorado. And we have a ton of stuff that we're going to do. And I think you've seen my vignette that I did the first one, I think,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
What did you think of the first vignette? Is it believable?
Oh yeah. Very
Did
believable.
it look like I was the Don, a made guy,
Yes.
somebody who went through, and that's not even with wrestling. That's just me and my appearance, my persona. So you say, and a lot of people said, "Shit, Vito, it's pretty legit." Just like when I started out and I did my German character, which I don't know if you ever watched any of the Skull Von Crush from
Yep.
Memphis before.
Yep.
That was believable because I studied and learned from certain people. And then you take it and you put it on screen and you're like, man, I hate you. Memphis, Tennessee, I bring that up because that's USWA. They just had a Hall of Fame. Congratulations to everybody out there. But those were the last of the territories where people believed in angles and characters and feuds and all that kind of stuff, right?
Yep.
The WWC in Puerto Rico or Carlos Colon in the 90s, another territory where they believed in angles and certain things. And I was portraying the German. When I went to WCW in Santo Domingo, and Jack Veneno, who was probably bigger than the president at the time there because he was Jack Veneno, the greatest wrestler of all time. And I worked a program with him, and I was the German. I came in effectively, you know what I mean, in all three places. That's not including all my other stops along the way, right? So when you talk about what you do, how you present yourself, how you do things, hey, the trick and the name of the game is to pass it on. If you pass it on, you are a real pro. And I've been one to get in the ring with many, many, many. I can't even tell you how many people I have taught in the wrestling business and took the time to teach, right? And they say 20 and 30 years later, Vito, that was the greatest experience of my life. But now I understand. If I would have listened to you back then, I could have did something different with my career. And people thought, oh, I was being a hard ass. No, because the guys who taught me, that's the way they taught me. And that's how you give it to the young guys. You know, I still get in the ring when I go on these trips and I wrestle with these guys. And, I'm wrestling against 10 or 15 guys and I'm just in there teaching, going, teaching, going, teaching, going. You know, they think like a lot of guys, thankfully, they still think I'm 40 years old. I'm not. And I still keep in shape. And as you could see on camera, hey, this is TV ready. And I always said that always be a spray tan away from being on TV. Keep in shape, keep your look, keep your persona, keep everything in check because you never know when you're going to get a call. To go with Tony Khan's, right? They don't have an Italian faction. I would love to go over there and bring it out. A ready-made faction here in NXT that if you did bring me in, there are ideas I won't say on TV and I won't say because I will save them for my own. But there are certain characters that can be added and that a storyline can be good enough to bring it to the next level. Now, you watch the product and you watch the D'Angelo family. In your honest opinion, are they ready to go to the next level?
I feel like Tony is. I don't know about the whole group though. I know Stax is still kind of young in the business, trained by Dr. Tom, so he had a good trainer, but he's still pretty young just as far as TV ready.
Dr. Tom is a genius. He's a great trainer. He has worlds of knowledge. He is an asset to the business because he did it the same way I did. And I have the utmost respect for him because his knowledge is key. And that's what teaches the guys today. You say Tony D'Angelo is good enough to go up to the main roster. To do what? With nobody beside him. He's going to get eaten up, spitting out. They're not going to do nothing. Lost in the shuffle, and then that's it. That's why I always say a guy needs a veteran presence with him to guide him during the matches, to be with him to this way he can exceed and excel to get to the next level. And this is not saying this is wrestling 101. This is not saying I need a job. This is what it's about. Because when they told me, Vito, you need to go here, you need to go here, you need to go here, you always have a job in the business because you have all this experience, right? I've been to all these places. I've done TVs. I've written TV. I've agent matches. I worked a gorilla position for other TV companies. I've done all this stuff. And I sit home and I'm like, okay, if I had a chance to do this, right? And the guys listened, their careers would expand or their minds would expand to a new level. So this way, they can make it to the next tier. I went down to Rocky Mountain Pro for the first time, right? And a good group of kids. Almost every one of them asked me to help them with their match, talk to them, and and spread the knowledge. They were excited I was coming in because they know of my legacy. When I got there and I talked to all the guys and told them, I said, guys, I'm coming in, this week. I said, I will get in the ring and work out with you guys for 2 days. Some guys will cherish it. Some guys won't. Some guys will be, okay, this is going to be great, And it's not to say they don't have training there. They have D'Lo, they have the owner, and they have, when they do their school, they have guys training guys who are maybe on the same level. The owner can't be there, so he has somebody else trying to run the control because everybody has life and everybody has things. But you always need a senior member, somebody with experience to teach. I don't know how much I can get through in the little bit of time that I have, in the 2 days, but that little bit of time should help elevate some people's minds and let them see a vision that you can make it in the business if you listen to some experience.
Totally agree. Definitely. So interesting just about that though, because like that guy Stacks, right? He puts that tweet out there. Does that
Yeah.
bother you, or is he doing that a part of his gimmick, or like what did you
No,
take out of that?
it bothered me because it was disrespectful. Send your fan mail to Tony D'Angelo. Why is that? Tony D'Angelo is trying to be me.
Right.
So I'm going to send fan mail. Totally disrespectful. You don't disrespect veterans on the thing, especially when you haven't done anything in the business and you're there not even for a cup of coffee. And the guys, who are in developmental, I tell them one thing: hey, I was developmental champion, heavyweight champ at Deep South. You haven't been developmental champion yet, and you haven't made it to the main roster, and you haven't been to Ribera's in Puerto Rico and all these other places, but you're talking smack to me, and I've done it all. Just because you're in NXT doesn't mean you made it in the wrestling business. You have a long way to go. Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
And God forbid I ever said that to Bill Eadie, Honky Tonk Man, Ivan Koloff, Bret Hart, The Undertaker, British Bulldog, the Hulk Hogan, Ric Flair. Those are some heavy names when I started. Heavy hitters. What do you think they would have did?
Oh yeah. You'd be.
Right? Legion of Doom,
Yep.
Barbarian, Warlord. You're in there with some big, thick men. God forbid you ever said anything that they didn't like. Maybe he wouldn't have gave it to you, but them other guys would. I'll give you for instance. I go to TV. I have to wrestle Legion of Doom, and I met Hannibal and Hawk the week or two prior at an independent show with Johnny Rods. Introduced myself. They said, "Hey, Vito, what's going on?" I said, "Hey guys, Tony Gurria is our agent." So um, Tony comes over, and I have been doing TVs for a little bit. So they said, "Hey, you're going to take the finish." I ain't taking that finish. Well, the four of us looked at this kid and was like, "Oh shit, you really just said that." Vito, are you okay with it? Yes, sir. I'm good. They tattooed this kid. The next match, who does he have? Samoan SWAT team.
Oh.
Ripped his singlet off his body, beat the living shit out of him. Next match is there. Next TV, who does he got? Undertaker. If you remember the guy who had his boots burned, I think
Yeah.
it was Monday Night Raw as a TV, right? So comes back and he says, "Oh man, guys burned my boots." Tony Gurria says, "Well, uh, I don't know." They said, "Well, you can quit the business now." You
Yeah.
know, I mean, he did wind up quitting the business. This guy, but the beatings he took because he was disrespectful. He didn't want to take somebody's finish.
Terrible.
And then like you have Stacks and like social media is the worst thing in creation because you talk through social media, just like that Kevin Nash, Logan Paul. Is that it? Logan
Yes.
Paul thing,
Yep.
right? You know, you look at that and Kevin Nash. If it wasn't for Kevin Nash smartening everybody up to get their money in the business, when he made that promo, I think it was on WCW, which stuck with me throughout my whole career, right? And if he didn't open the door for that opening for guys to get paid, who would have been the one, right? if Jesse the Body Ventura tried to do a union and tried to do things, Roddy Piper tried to do things, and they were um, negated, right? And you talk about, how do you make it and how do you make things right? There was no social media, and you handle things man to man, and like if we would have had that in place, a lot of guys would have pensions. A lot of guys would have had medical benefits. A lot of guys maybe still be alive because maybe the medical benefits would have paid for their health. Maybe they'd still be here today. And I say that very diplomatically and politely because a lot of people maybe don't have the money. They spent their resources. They don't have medical insurance. Um, and they don't have the time, or like not the time, but they don't have the resources to help themselves later in life. But if these things are in place, then it would be good. When Kevin Nash did it, you remember the slew of people who jumped ship and went over for the money, right? And wound up going back over to WWE, right?
Yep.
But, should let's take Bret Hart for instance. Bret Hart was one of my first matches. I wrestled Bret Hart 4 times in the WWF. First time he had, that was his first title defense when he won the title. And Bret Hart was a gentleman to me, treated me good. I wrestled him 4 times, became my friend. And he always took time to teach me things, which is cool. And when he went over to WCW, I always said Bret Hart doesn't belong in WCW. He is a WWF guy. Ric Flair, who I admired and wrestled, and I wrestled him as Ric Flair, and every day goes by, I don't cherish those moments, right? Ric Flair was WCW, just like Sting was WCW. Hulk Hogan will always and forever be WWF, WWE, even though he had the greatest run as a heel doing the NWO with Eric Bischoff
Yep.
in WCW. And you give credit where credit's due. But when you talk about what guys belong on the main page, some guys should never leave. You know what I mean? But money in certain situations and things like that, and I respect all those gentlemen very highly. And you look at what they went through, and physically, mentally, career wise, and you say, hey, you know, I thank them for paving the way. A lot of guys don't have the thanks to say thank you for help paving the way for guys who to wrestle today. So instead of saying things on the internet and mocking guys, maybe sometimes it's better not to say nothing at all. Or if you have something to say, pick up the phone, shoot a text. Hey, you want to meet someone and talk about this? That's what men do. That's why I don't believe in the social media going back and forth. And you see a lot of it out there. You know what I'm saying? And guys use social media like they use the towel in the bathroom or they use
Yeah.
toilet paper.
Yep.
It's not special. Guys go on there, they don't see you, they live in a different state. I'm going to say this, I'm going to say that. Really. But if you were in front of me, I'd crack your goddamn head open and then be like, what are you going to say then? What are you going to do? This is the land of the cop callers. You can call cop. Go right ahead.
Yep.
John, some things are right, some things are wrong. And I don't ever come out and say anything. You watch my stuff and you watched all my things. And like, I don't come out here and like say things to be brash or I'm better than anybody, but I say the truth. And if guys would just understand the psychology of what's going on and say, hey, he's saying this, but why is he saying it? And overread it and think for a second instead of saying, hey, you can send your fan mail to Tony D'Angelo. Wow, really? You don't even have 10 years in the business and you're talking to somebody who's got over 30. You haven't wrestled, you're still in developmental and you haven't made the main roster. If you do get cut from NXT, where are you going? You're going to be known as an NXT, ex NXT superstar, not a WWE superstar. You're an NXT superstar. Okay, that'll last for about a year. And then what?
True. Very true.
Respectfully to everyone out there, and this is not me shooting venom. This is just guys giving you some experienced perspective of what's ahead. Always have a plan B. Just because you're in NXT doesn't guarantee you'll make the main roster or go any further. If you do make the main roster and you're teetering in NXT, there have been a lot of great talents who have been cut by NXT and went other places. But how often does that happen?
Yeah, not very often. Just going back to your point before when you were talking about Chuck Zito, I was just thinking, how did he actually get into WCW to begin with? Was it you? Did you bring him in, or did Russo bring him in?
Russo brought him in.
Because the Mamalukes, that was great because it was you, obviously Johnny the Bull, but then Tony Marinara and Disco Inferno kind of sprinkled in, and then Chuck Zito put real legitimacy on it because everyone knows, or should know who Chuck Zito is. So it's like, wow, but great idea by Russo bringing Chuck in too. That like you could you bring in certain guys, it makes it more legit.
You see, and that's what we're talking about here. We're not trying to steal anything. We're trying to make it a legit family, make it more legitimate. Somebody with credibility, somebody who can give you the rub, somebody who may be able to pass you the torch down the road as you being the real Don of wrestling and you may be doing something. So when you think of it like that, and here I am with Chuck Zito 20 years later. Yeah, Vito, of course, anything you need. Talk to him online all the time. And he says, yeah, use my name. He's got a documentary coming up. He's using that, and I'm going to be in his documentary.
Oh, awesome.
So, hey, that's cool, And when you talk about people meshing, can I get a role in Tulsa King with Stallone? I definitely fit the part. But the red tape you have to go through to get in that, something like that, you got to know the right people. It's just like anything else, just like WWE, NXT, AEW, NWA, even Rocky Mountain Pro. Might not be a big syndicate, but they have things in place to be big. And if I do my thing out there, people are going to watch. And I promise all you people, I already talked to Mr. Russo. Things that we have planned are going to be great that you are going to say, hey, this is the TV I want to watch for this. And it's not $1 billion corporation. It's not $1 million company. But you will tune in to watch it because it's good, legit, quality stuff.
And Russo's booking Rocky Mountain, right?
That's right. Now, what would be better than for Big Vito and Vince Russo to get on camera and go at it again, just like in WCW?
I like it.
Right? Nobody knows. I've been friends with Vince Russo since day one of wrestling.
From Johnny Rodz, right? His school?
Right. Now, Vince Russo, when he came in, he had an idea of what wrestling was. But there was one day when it was shown that it was real. I was training. Now we're in Gleason's gym, boxing gym, right? Everybody's hitting the bags, who's boxing on the side. And we had a demonstration one day. And Johnny Rodz was sitting there, and all the students were around. I was in the ring with a gentleman named Larry DeGarris, who taught me a great deal about wrestling and amateur wrestling. And I appreciate that. So I'm just starting out in wrestling. I'm not too versed in amateur wrestling, but I was learning. And there were a lot of people there. Vinny was there that day. And he's riding me, riding me, riding. Finally, I had had enough and I got mad. I got up. He said, man, this guy's struggling the whole time. I got up. I turned around and I slapped him so hard in the teeth. The boxing ring stopped. The heavy bag stopped. Johnny Rod stood there in shock. Vince Russo panicked and he stood there and was like his mouth was open. He never seen anything like that because he didn't think wrestling could be like that, right? And he wrote something he wrote it in his book, and he wrote about it in an article that he published. And then after I slapped him, I stood there and I was ready to go again. I got down back on all fours and I finished my training. But I let everybody know I'm no sucker. I'm not going to be embarrassed. And if I want to get up, I'm going to crack you one, and then I'm going to go down. I just let everybody know in the house, this is legit. But when I went to Japan and I out wrestled the Japanese wrestlers, first person I came back and thanked, Larry DeGarris. I said, if it wasn't for you, I would never have been able to do that. I said, if you didn't ride me like that, I wouldn't be a great wrestler. That's how I learned how to shoot. That's how I learned how to wrestle, amateur wrestle. Because when people used to see me at mat wrestle, amateur wrestle, they were shocked. They said, man, Vito, where's this guy? I said, I don't get a chance to do this, but this is how I was trained. So when it came time to shoot with some people on the mat, I could go. And I just take, okay, let's see what you got. You that good? Okay. I never bragged about it, but everybody knew I can go and I can handle my business. I'm not the toughest guy in wrestling. I'm not the, top 10, top 5, but I'm recognized. That's fine. I don't have to be the top, but you have the respect of people when you step in the ring, not to cross the line. And I appreciate it, but that's because all of the greats taught me how to be that wrestler.
Did Russo bring you into WCW too after ECW?
He did. He brought me in. He said he had a spot for me. He says he wants you to tag with Johnny the Bull, and he's a young kid in the power plant. And I said, okay. So that's how the Mamalukes got together. He told me the characters he wanted, and it was easy to do because it was from the movie Midnight Run with who was it? De Niro as the cop. Do you remember that movie, Midnight Run?
Yep.
Okay. Right. So that's where the two guys who were the wise guys, two flunkies, that's where those two characters came from.
Oh, wow. I never knew that. Okay.
So you talk about, hey, Vito, can you do this? I says, yeah. So you mix it up with your Staten Islandese and you follow what they're doing. Like we're, it's tough guys. We could take care of business, but we're dumb as a stump. Like a couple of vignettes. We're going to get him. We're going to get him. We're going to crash him. Hey, who's the guy we're chasing again?
Right. Good stuff, though. I like the Mamalukes. Obviously, two-time tag team champion, so was pretty high up on the card as far as just where you guys were at.
We were high on the card. And remember, guys today got it easy because the guys from yesterday are not there. And for you to be a champion on the main roster, get TV time, wrestle everybody, right? And be popular during that time with Hogan, Macho Man, The Warrior, DDP, Sting, Arn Anderson, Ric Flair, Terry Funk. There was so much talent there. Scott Hall, Kevin Nash, the NWO, Scott Steiner, Goldberg. And here I am in the thick of it, and I'm tag team champion. And later became hardcore champion. So I think I made it pretty good. And my father wasn't a wrestler. I didn't have no inside ties. And my first title didn't come because of Vince Russo, it came because of Kevin Sullivan, because Russo had left. Kevin Sullivan is the one who said, Vito, I think it's time. I said, time for what? He said, "We're gonna put the straps on you and Johnny tonight." I was shocked, and it's like, wow, but I earned that. It's nothing that nobody gave to me, and I kept that because I earned it. And being able to wrestle Terry Funk on Nitro for the hardcore title and win in front of millions of people, and for him to shake my hand, hand me the belt, that was big. That was most. I can't even tell you. That's the most significant time in my career because that was like a passing of the torch. You say, "Hey, he's all right. Let him in." So
Would you say that's the high water mark in WCW, beating Funk on TV and him, obviously raising your hand?
I mean, hey, he never gets mentioned in any Mount Rushmores, but he's up there. And when you talk about tough guys, Harley Race, Wahoo McDaniel, Terry Funk, that's a top. Those are some tough guys right there.
Big time.
And here I am, a kid. I'm not saying I was a child, but compared to these veterans, I was a kid, and I didn't have the years that they had in the business. But you're going toe to toe with the best workers in the business, and if they accept you and they let you play in their backyard, it's just like me wrestling Kevin Nash on Nitro in the main event of Nitro. And I did my whole arsenal and suplex Kevin Nash in front of millions of people. Me wrestling Scott Steiner and doing everything against every top superstar because they didn't view me as some lackey. I was respected. They knew I would take care of them. They respected my wrestling. And that's an art form and that's a compliment. It didn't matter if you won or lost, but if you had a great match against the best guys who were in the championship run, if WCW would have stayed open, right? And I always said I could hold any title, but the world title, it would have to be a specific situation for me to win it. I wasn't in there to be world heavyweight champion. It wasn't about nostalgia. It was about me being a great wrestler. It wasn't about belts. And that's from the heart.
Were you shocked when WCW goes out of business and sells to WWE? Was that something you guys were ready for, you saw coming, or you had no idea you were shocked?
Shock value 100%. Eric Bischoff had a deal for the Mandalay Bay for $36 million. There was a deal that went down. And I think every documentary podcast or everybody in the business probably has a version. So we'll just leave it as it was a shock to me, and we'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, there's a lot out there. With that though, it's funny. It's like they always say, "Who killed WCW?" Right? That's the whole thing. Who killed it? And if you read the Nitro book and you watch that documentary, it's almost like Brad Siegel and the executives, for whatever reason, didn't want wrestling anymore. I mean, it's just shocking, some of that stuff.
So you want to know what happened? You want to know what killed WCW? I mean, to be honest with you, right?
Hmm.
It was the changing of the guard who was taking over the booking and who was doing what. And you had too many cooks in the kitchen. And I say that respectfully because that's the gist of what everybody else says, from Kevin Nash and everybody. There was just too many bosses. And if we would have just, and I'm not saying this because Vince Russo is my friend, okay? And I'm not saying this to knock anybody. But if you would have just left them alone, the ratings were at 2 million, 3 million, right? And he was putting out good content for people still will go back and watch 20 years ago for WCW. So it couldn't have been that bad, right? And then at the time, people were still tuning in to WCW versus WWE. So, but because people didn't have power or they didn't have creative control or all this other stuff that happens, big money, big problems. But when you're on the lower card, right? And you're saying, okay, what the hell's going on? You're getting pushed, you're depushed. You're getting pushed, you're getting depushed. And like I was like that close to being a major superstar, but every time I got to that point, it was okay. Somebody else took over.
So WCW is gone. You don't go to WWE right away. I mean, it was XWF, TNA in between. But how do you get to WWE eventually? Like, how do they sign you? Who brings you in?
So what happened was I did my XWF. I went back to Japan. I did overseas tours, and then Russo was in TNA. I went to TNA. Um, I was wrestling there. Everything was going good, and Vince had an falling out with somebody, and I said, "I seen the handwriting on the wall." I said, "This is going to be WCW again." And I left. I called up John Laurinaitis. I called up Nunzio. They brought me in for tryouts, and that's how I got signed.
Which is great because that you can do like the FBI, but really instead of the Mamalukes, but with Nunzio, you change it up because obviously he's FBI from ECW.
And that was a great thing, me and Nunzio. And and like they say, well, how did you break in? I broke in as a bodyguard for Nunzio. He won the title on my first night. We had a great run. We should have been tag team champions in the WWE, but it was, this tag team, that tag team, the other tag team. Who's this? Who's that? Plus, you had Heidenreich and Animal there who were doing the Legion of Doom. You had the Mexicals, you had the Dicks, you had Steven Regal and Finley, and I can't think of the other guy's name.
David Taylor.
Yeah, Dave Taylor. You had a lot of competition, but when it came to tag team wrestling, Nunzio and I were a very, very good team. Yeah, Paul London and Brian Kendrick also. And we were a good team. We should have been tag team champions, but it just didn't happen.
When you look at that run too, then there's the dress gimmick, which people like, oh, did he like it? Did he not like it? It seemed like you just took the ball and you ran with it because you got that gimmick over, even though he's wearing a dress. I mean, it seemed like you got the gimmick over. No matter what they give you, you just have to hit it out of the park.
That comes with experience and knowing the business, and for listening to all the vets who took the time to teach me, which I'm saying thank you again, because I wouldn't have been able to do that gimmick unless I had that kind of experience. And it wasn't something I said, okay, this was done on the fly, guys. And this was just me using my head. You know what I mean? Okay, what are we going to do? And everybody in the back was sitting there waiting for me to do something with it. See if I'm going to mess up. And I took this and I ran an undefeated streak.
Yeah.
And I posed in Playgirl magazine, got my face on the cover, and that was when Playboy was very hot back then. So there was a lot of great things I accomplished in that year. I was the most recognizable pro athlete, no matter where I went in that dress. But that's VITO. They knew who I was. They knew me. Everything. I met a bunch of great people during that time. I helped a lot of people. I opened the door for people to do this transgender, um, do their sexuality today. I was the guy who opened the door so people could be accepted. And people today are doing their gimmicks, and some people live this lifestyle, which is a great thing. And this is not taking away from the men and women who are doing this on TV. And I'm very happy for you that you could be yourselves. And I'm not taking any credit for myself, but when you look back at that time, that was a barrier that wasn't touched. And that was something everybody says, oh, this one wore a dress. No, I lived that character 100%. So, and not everybody did that. Now it's kayfabe, and now is the wrestling business. That's why I got the respect from the boys in the dressing room, and nobody ever mocked me because I carried it out 100%.
Did you think it was like a joke at first, or like, oh, they want me to do this dress gimmick? Did you think that, or do you think it almost like a Dusty thing, like you give me anything, I'm just gonna roll with it. I'm gonna, take the polka dots, I'm gonna turn it into something successful.
I had some issues with the government, so I had to change characters. And WWE was kind enough to let me, or they came up with this, and I was able to get out of any incriminating things at the time. You just like Vinny the Chin Gigante used to walk around in bathrobes. I ran around in dresses, so I got out of a lot of things. And let's put it this way: it was a happy ending, and nothing happened. But you want to know something? People still ask me to do it today, and they still talk about it. So I did something right. Just like they talk about the Mamluks, I did something right. They talk about the FBI, I did something right. They even bring up, when you really get nostalgia, they talk about the Baldies. I did something right. They still talk about Skull Von Crush, one of the last foreigners to ever do it like 100%. So you talk about my career. I lived my characters, I lived my gimmick, I did everything by the book. So here I sit with you today, and here I am.
Quite a career. If you think about it, everywhere you were, that's like, wow, that's like a true veteran. Like, okay, Japan, like you mentioned, Puerto Rico, you know what I mean? You were like in each territory, each spot, USWA, probably the last known territory, really. And you
Right.
went through, then you went to ECW, WCW, WB. It's like TNA, even. Like you basically almost worked everywhere, pretty much.
Good work, ever. You want to know what's funny? In 1998, I went to All Japan, and I did my character. I used to do this Zig Heil, and the whole audience used to Zig Heil on me back.
Really? Wow.
I'm not lying to you. I used to go to Four Corners and do it, Zig Heil, Zig Heil, Zig. And people, the boys were in astonishment because we knew what it meant. But to the people in Japan, it was like greatness. It was like something different.
Right.
And I just did my thing. And the one time I got to do that on WWF TV when I wrestled the Big Boss Man, he said, "Vito, I want you to do your character tonight." He says, "If they cut it out, great. They didn't cut it out. I did the Zig Heil on TV and everything."
Wow.
Yeah.
Damn.
You look up Skull Von Crush or Vito Cruz versus the Boss Man. I'm doing it in the ring.
How crazy they didn't take that out. Wow.
But it was good stuff, and everybody thought I was a signed talent. That's the other crazy thing. Everybody thought I was signed to WWE because I was on TV all the time.
Did you want to be signed at that point, or did you like kind of being all over the place?
I had gotten offered a contract by Sergeant Slaughter, who was the booker back then. It was my second year, it was Christmas time. And I called the office, and then they took back the offer. It wasn't until years later that I was with Sarge, and I had wrestled Sarge on the Indies, and I always kept friends with him. And I sat him down one day, and we were talking. I said, "Sarge, can you tell me why you took back the offer?" I have to know. He says, "Vito, I'm going to tell you." He says, "You had the tools and you had the body. You didn't have the mind or the maturity." He saved me. You know what I mean? So I appreciate that wisdom from a veteran, even though it hurt me, like, because I couldn't understand why. But years later, I understood why. I wasn't ready mentally. I was still a kid, and I didn't know. I could wrestle and I could do my job, but could I be mature enough to do that position?
Right, but not at that point. Eventually, yes, but not at that point.
But a lot of guys should think about that, and a lot of guys don't know that. And they say, "Oh man, you were on the internet 8 years before." Yeah, but I wasn't ready. You know what I mean? And then it wasn't until I was in WCW, and I think it was Sting. He says, "Vito," he says, "you want to be a pro, right?" I says, "Yep." He says, "Do you see Bret Hart acting like that?" He says, "No." He says, "That's what a pro is." He says, "You want to be a pro, act like one." I took that to heart. And I says, okay, you got it. And I changed. But if the veterans didn't take the time to tell me these things, then I would not be who I am today. Like here, I'm on your podcast, a two-man power trip. And, this is not because, I'm some jerky indie wrestler. That's because I'm an established, accomplished former champion who is respected in the industry and is sitting here talking to a podcasting journalist about wrestling today.
Yep. And hey, you had quite a run, like I said. And hey, you mentioned Japan even beating Misawa, who's a god in that country. So
Well, I
yeah.
think that was a little immaturity because I got mad because he was laughing at me. So I said, "The hell with him." But you think about all the greats I've wrestled, tagging with Tenru, wrestling with Zawa, Kabashi, tagging with Gary Albright, Steve Williams, wrestling all of the greatest wrestlers of our generation. And I'm still wrestling today, and I still want to get in there and knock heads with these young guys. If I had the practice, now here's where it comes in. I've been staying on the ground when I'm wrestling. I would like to fly again, but I don't have a facility where I could practice every day like I did. I'm not comfortable going up. I probably could do it, but I'm a perfectionist and I want to practice like I used to make sure it's 100% good so I don't hurt nobody. Some guys just throw themselves off the top rope and they don't care, but that's not Vito. And I've landed elbows on the best in the business, never nobody complained. I've done things to people in the business. I've suplexed 400 pounders, 7-footers, but if I don't have the practice, practice makes perfect. A lesson for all you young wrestlers out there. Go to your wrestling schools. Don't just go to indie shows and think you're a wrestler. You have to practice your craft.
For sure. Hey, if you're in the Orlando area, I know Ace Steel has got a good school, the Foundation of Wrestling.
So then we have to get with Ace Steel. Maybe you can make
Yeah.
a phone call, put a word in.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. Because you're
All
probably
right.
not that far from him, because he's not that far from the Performance Center, I don't think, either, down there.
Whatever would work, however I can get some practice time in, that would be welcome.
That would be great. As we head towards the wind down here, head towards the finish, what's next for you? Because I know you said you're going to be out there doing some more shows, Rocky Mountain Pro. So what's next? What do you got coming up down the pike?
So we have this week, we're going to Rocky Mountain Pro. We're going to be taping some TVs. We're going to do some shows. We have some other shows coming up, which we'll, let you know about it. Guys, I'm available for bookings at bigvito.com. Go check out my website, get on my social media, to Instagram, on, TikTok, on Twitter, which is X, Facebook at the Big Vito brand. I'm available for bookings. Let's bring me to your town. I'll work with your talent. Let's do some good business. And let's hope the guys from NXT are watching this. So this is a communication thing. Guys, nothing was ever meant to make you guys upset. This was just me teaching and telling you. It was never a shoot at you guys. You guys have potential. Let's work together. Let's do some business. If you read between the lines of stuff, instead of, sitting there getting angry, open your minds. If you have an open mind, you could do great things in the business.
And I feel like Tony D'Angelo trying to be the Don, you being the, I don't know, there's some synergy there that needs to be explored, especially in NXT.
I think it would be a great mix. I think he has, like I said, I think he has a world of potential. He's got the work ethic like myself, like he's a worker. He wants to work hard. He wants to succeed. But sometimes you need some guidance or somebody being on the outside in your ear next to you, teaching you how to use your energy in a positive way. Not that nobody is not doing it, but sometimes you need that veteran closeness to bring it out in you so you can excel.
I was just listening to an interview with somebody. He's somewhat of a veteran of the business, and he was managing a wrestler, and the fans didn't understand why. But he wouldn't give all the ins and outs. But he was saying he was kind of like there in the guy's corner to help him without the fans even realizing it. But the fans didn't catch on. They just hated that he's the manager, but he's literally there to help the guy that he's managing, not get heat or anything like that. He was like, I was actually there to help the guy because he was so green and didn't know some stuff. I'm giving him information without even the crowd realizing it. Like I'm giving him the right way to go without the crowd even paying attention to it.
Yeah, I mean, guys, there's like I said, I'm going to Rocky Mountain Pro. There's ways to watch and look at this gimmick, and you're going to see promos, and you're going to see things come up, and you're going to say, that's what it's about. Not to say that anybody else is doing it wrong, but when you have the mind, the experience, and the know how to put it on screen and work with these young guys to make it look even bigger and better without $1 million promotion behind you, you're going to say, I want that. And that's saying it respectfully and humbly to everybody out there.
So, hey, Shawn Michaels, hey, Matt Bloom, everybody in NXT, Big Vito can help. The Don can help your future Don, hopefully, Tony D'Angelo. You could definitely help him out.
Definitely, definitely. It'd be a welcome. It would be welcome, and it would make my heart full if I can. What people don't realize, I started in the WWF in my rookie year. To me, that is my home. That's where I want to finish my career. That's where I belong. Because people don't realize, from 91 up until 98, I was working on and off of the WWFE. When I got to ECW and I started to break through in ECW, I got a call from Howard Finkel. Howard Finkel called me. He was a dear friend to me throughout the years. Vito, we have something for you. I says, what do you mean? He says, yeah, we want you to come down. We want you to come on down to Connecticut. We have a spot for you. I says, well, I said, all these years I've been trying to get in there, and I'm finally making my name for myself in ECW. I said, Howard, you're calling me now when I have this. Yes, we just recognize, and they knew that Howard and I were friends. Hardest thing I had to do was call him back and tell him, Howard, I cannot accept your offer. I'm going to stay in ECW. And that was after talking to Taz and Bubba Ray Dudley and talking to Paul. And I stuck by my word and I stuck with my guns. And they were 100% right. We gave you a chance here. You're doing great. And then now they want you because they didn't want, I guess they always knew I had the talent and I had what it took, but they didn't want ECW at the time to have another good wrestler. They wanted to, and guys, remember something. ECW, everybody who went to ECW went to WCW and the WWE. A lot of those guys from that era made good. A lot of us became champions on the next level. And even though some say ECW is better than WCW, ECW is better than the WWE, the ECW brand was unique, it was different, and it was an alternative, and it had a great cult following. Sometimes the best is not always the best, but when you look at the guys who are breaking their ass and doing what we were doing at ECW, you say, hey, I like this. It's all right. And I never forget my time there, and it was a cherished moment in my career, being there with those guys, and that was one of the best locker rooms I was ever in.
Nice. And hopefully you get to end it all in NXT or at least maybe WWE. So that would be awesome.
No, it would be good.
Run.
So now I'm going to be going down to Colorado. It's the second version as a Tulsa King. I'm going to be doing card games, open a casino, maybe a hotel. I might even visit my friend Jimmy Hoffa. They said he's over there under the Verrazano Bridge. You don't know everything, people. He's been living lovely for a long time out there. I'm not going to give you the address, but just know he's still around.
Wow, awesome. Yeah, Big Vito, thank you so much for all the time. Really appreciate it.
All right. Thank you very much for having me on your show. I always appreciate it. Thank you very much. Check out the two-man power trip with Johnny Paz. This is Big Vito LaGrasso, the Don, signing off. Have a good night.